Subscribe now for more shocking true crime stories from around the world. You won't want to miss what happens next. The grand ballroom of the Burj Al Noor Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and golden accents, a perfect setting for the wedding of the year. Guests in lavish attire mingled, their laughter and chatter filling the air as the newlyweds, Amina and Faisal, took their first steps as husband and wife. Amina, radiant in her intricate white gown embroidered with delicate pearls, smiled with a mixture of joy and nervous anticipation. At 24, she possessed the kind of ethereal beauty that turned heads, dark eyes that sparkled with intelligence, olive skin that glowed under the ballroom lights, and a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. Her hijab, adorned with Swarovski crystals, framed her face perfectly, completing the image of the ideal Muslim bride. Faisal, 32 and heir to one of Dubai's most prominent construction empires, held her hand firmly, his eyes reflecting pride and possession. Tall and commanding, with a perfectly groomed beard and traditional white kandura, he embodied everything Amina had dreamed of: wealth, status, and respectability. His family's fortune was built on decades of strategic investments and unwavering adherence to conservative values. The wedding had cost over 2 million dirhams, a testament to Faisal's devotion and his family's standing in Dubai's elite circles. 700 guests filled the opulent ballroom, including government officials, business tycoons, and members of prominent Emirati families. The celebration was a carefully orchestrated display of wealth and tradition, from the imported roses flown in from Ecuador to the renowned chef who had prepared a feast fit for royalty. But beneath the surface of this fairy tale, shadows lurked. Amina's past, carefully hidden from the glittering world she now inhabited, was a secret that could destroy everything she had worked so hard to achieve. Born and raised in Sharjah's Al Qasimiya district, far from Dubai's towering skyscrapers and luxury shopping malls, Amina had grown up in a cramped apartment with her widowed mother and 3 younger siblings. Her father had died when she was 16, leaving the family struggling to make ends meet. While her mother worked double shifts at a textile factory, Amina had taken on the responsibility of caring for her siblings and managing a household. Despite their circumstances, Amina had excelled in school, earning a scholarship to study business at the American University of Sharjah. It was there, away from her family's watchful eyes and the suffocating expectations of her conservative neighborhood, that she had tasted freedom for the first time. She had made friends from different backgrounds, attended parties, and for a brief period, had even dated a fellow student, a relationship that would have scandalized her family and community if discovered. The relationship had ended badly, leaving Amina heartbroken and determined to reinvent herself. She had moved to Dubai after graduation, securing a job at a prestigious marketing firm and slowly climbing the social ladder. She had learned to speak with the polished accent of the educated elite, had invested in designer clothes and expensive beauty treatments, and had carefully crafted a new identity, one that erased her humble origins and the mistakes of her youth. When she met Faisal at a charity gala 18 months ago, she had presented herself as the daughter of a successful businessman from Abu Dhabi, complete with fabricated stories about private schools and family vacations in Europe. Faisal, charmed by her beauty and apparent sophistication, had pursued her relentlessly. Their courtship had been traditional and respectful, conducted under the watchful eyes of both families, or at least the family Amina had invented. Now, as she stood beside her new husband, accepting congratulations from Dubai's most influential families, Amina felt the familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. She had managed to keep her secrets buried for over a year, but the closer she had gotten to Faisal and his family, the more precarious her position had become. The evening's festivities continued with traditional Emirati dances and live music, but Amina noticed Faisal becoming increasingly distracted. He kept checking his phone, his jaw tightening with each message. When his cousin Khalid approached him with a concerned expression and whispered something in his ear, Faisal's face darkened visibly. "What's wrong?" Amina asked, touching his arm gently. Faisal looked at her with an expression she had never seen before: cold, calculating, and filled with something that made her blood run cold. "Nothing that can't wait until later," he replied, his voice strained. As the night wore on, Amina felt the weight of her deception pressing down on her like a physical force. The champagne tasted bitter, the music seemed too loud, and the congratulations from guests felt hollow. She caught glimpses of hushed conversations, noticed the way some of Faisal's relatives looked at her with barely concealed suspicion. The past she had buried so carefully was clawing its way back to the surface, and she could feel her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. As they prepared to leave for their honeymoon suite in the hotel's penthouse, Amina whispered a silent prayer, hoping against hope that her secrets would remain buried for just one more night. But in Dubai's tight-knit, elite circles, secrets had a way of surfacing at the worst possible moments. And for Amina, the worst was yet to come. The penthouse suite at the Burj Al Noor was a testament to luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Dubai's glittering skyline, marble floors adorned with Persian rugs, and a king-sized bed draped in silk. Rose petals had been scattered across the pristine white sheets, and champagne chilled in a crystal bucket beside the bed. It should have been the perfect setting for a wedding night, but the atmosphere between Amina and Faisal was thick with unspoken tension. Amina stood by the window, still in her wedding gown, watching the city lights twinkle below. The Burj Khalifa pierced the night sky like a golden needle, and the Dubai fountain danced in the distance. She had dreamed of this moment for months, becoming Mrs. Faisal Al Rashid, securing her place in Dubai's elite society, leaving her past behind forever. But something was terribly wrong. Faisal had been silent during the elevator ride to their suite, his jaw clenched, his eyes avoiding hers. Now he stood near the marble bar, pouring himself a glass of whiskey despite his usual abstinence from alcohol. The crystal tumbler trembled slightly in his hand, and Amina noticed the way his knuckles had turned white as he gripped it. "Faisal, Habibti, what's troubling you?" Amina asked, using the Arabic endearment that had always softened his demeanor. She approached him slowly, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "This should be the happiest night of our lives." He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her stomach drop. Gone was the adoring gaze she had grown accustomed to over the past 18 months. Instead, she saw something cold and calculating, tinged with what looked like disgust. "Should it be?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me, Amina, what makes you think you deserve happiness?" The question hit her like a physical blow. "I don't understand. What are you talking about?" Faisal reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. With deliberate slowness, he scrolled through his messages, his face growing darker with each swipe. "My cousin Khalid has some very interesting friends. Friends who work in background verification. Friends who specialize in uncovering truths." Amina's heart began to race. She felt the blood drain from her face as the implications of his words sank in. "Faisal, sit down," he commanded, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. She obeyed, sinking into the plush velvet armchair near the window. Her hands shook as she smoothed her wedding dress, the weight of the fabric suddenly feeling suffocating. Faisal began to pace, his expensive leather shoes echoing against the marble. "Let me tell you what I learned tonight, on what was supposed to be the most sacred night of our marriage. First, your father wasn't a successful businessman from Abu Dhabi. He was a taxi driver who died in debt, leaving your family in poverty." Each word was like a dagger to Amina's heart. She opened her mouth to speak, but he held up a hand to silence her. "Second, you didn't attend private schools in Switzerland. You went to a public school in Sharjah's poorest district. Third, your mother doesn't own a boutique in Abu Dhabi. She works in a textile factory, earning barely enough to feed your siblings." Tears began to stream down Amina's cheeks, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "Faisal, please let me explain." "Explain what?" he roared, his composure finally cracking. "Explain how you lied to me for 18 months? Explain how you deceived my entire family? Explain how you made a mockery of our traditions and values." He stopped pacing and stood directly in front of her, his shadow falling across her trembling form. But that's not even the worst part, is it, Amina? Or should I call you by your real name? Amina bint Muhammad al-Qasimi, the girl who was seen kissing a Christian boy at university parties. The final revelation hit her like a tsunami. Amina doubled over, sobbing uncontrollably. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling around her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "How did you?" she gasped between sobs. "Photos," Faisal said coldly. "Multiple photos of you at parties, drinking alcohol, dancing with men, kissing that Kafir boy. Photos that my business associate's sons took and kept as trophies of their wild university days." He pulled out his phone again and showed her the screen. There she was, 5 years younger, laughing and carefree, her arms around a blonde American student named Michael. In another photo, they were kissing at what appeared to be a New Year's Eve party. "I trusted you," Faisal continued, his voice breaking slightly. "I believe you were pure, untouched, worthy of the Al-Rashid name. I defended you to my mother when she questioned your background. I paid 2 million dirhams for a wedding to celebrate our union. And all this time, you were nothing but a lying whore." The word hit Amina like a slap. She looked up at him through her tears, seeing a man she no longer recognized. The gentle, loving Faisal who had courted her with poetry and flowers had been replaced by someone cold and cruel. "I'm still the same person you fell in love with," she whispered desperately. "My past doesn't change who I am now. I love you, Faisal. I've never loved anyone the way I love you." Faisal laughed bitterly. "Love? You don't know the meaning of the word. You're a fraud, a deceiver, a stain on my family's honor." He walked to the window, staring out at the city below. "Do you know what this means for me? For my family? When this gets out, and it will get out, we'll be the laughingstock of Dubai. My business partners will question my judgment. My mother will never forgive me. My reputation will be destroyed." Amina stood up, her legs shaking. "It doesn't have to get out. We can work through this. We can work through this." Faisal spun around, his eyes blazing with fury. "You think this is something we can just sweep under the rug? You think I can just pretend that my wife isn't a lying, impure woman who has brought shame upon my family name?" The suite fell silent except for the sound of Amina's quiet sobs and the distant hum of the city below. The rose petals on the bed seemed to mock them. A romantic gesture now turned into a symbol of broken dreams and shattered trust. Faisal walked to the bar and poured another whiskey, his hands steadier now. "I want you to understand something, Amina. In my family, honor is everything. It's more important than money, more important than love, more important than life itself." He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her blood run cold. "And you, my dear wife, have stolen that honor from me." The silence in the penthouse suite stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap at any moment. Amina remained frozen in the velvet chair, her wedding dress now feeling like a costume in a cruel play. The city lights below continued their eternal dance, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding 40 floors above. Faisal set down his whiskey glass with deliberate precision, the crystal making a sharp clink against the marble bar. He walked to the bedroom area and began methodically removing his wedding attire. First the gold watch his father had given him, then his cufflinks, each movement calculated and cold. "Faisal, please," Amina whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "We can fix this. I can explain everything. My past. It was a different life. I was young, confused. I found my way back to our traditions, to our faith. That's why I wanted to marry you, to become the woman I was meant to be." He paused in his undressing, his back still turned to her. "The woman you were meant to be?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "You were meant to be honest. You were meant to be pure. You were meant to honor your family and your husband with truth." Amina stood up, her legs unsteady beneath the weight of her elaborate gown. She moved toward him, desperate to bridge the growing chasm between them. "I am that woman now. I haven't touched another man since I met you. I've prayed 5 times a day. I've fasted during Ramadan. I've lived according to our values. Doesn't that count for anything?" Faisal turned around slowly, and the expression on his face made her step back. "You think putting on a hijab and saying prayers erases what you've done? You think pretending to be someone you're not makes you worthy of my name?" He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, pressing his palm against the cool glass. The Dubai skyline stretched endlessly before them, a testament to ambition and transformation. "My grandfather built this empire from nothing," he said, his voice taking on a distant quality. "He started with a single construction truck and turned it into a billion-dirham business. But do you know what he valued most? Reputation, honor, the knowledge that the Al Rashid name meant something." Amina watched him, searching for any sign of the man who had once written her love letters in Arabic calligraphy, who had surprised her with jasmine flowers because he knew they were her favorite. "Your grandfather would understand forgiveness," she said softly. "Islam teaches us about redemption, about second chances." Faisal's reflection in the window showed a bitter smile. "Islam also teaches us about the importance of honesty between spouses, about the sanctity of marriage, about the consequences of deception." He turned back to her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her blood freeze. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was something far more dangerous. A cold calculation, as if he were solving a business problem rather than confronting his wife. "I've been thinking," he said, beginning to pace again, "about what happens next, about how to minimize the damage you've caused." "What do you mean?" Amina asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. "Well, divorce is out of the question. Too public, too scandalous. It would raise questions about why I'm divorcing my bride on our wedding night. People would investigate, and then your little secrets would become everyone's entertainment." He stopped pacing and fixed her with a stare that made her skin crawl. "No, divorce would only make things worse for both of us." Amina felt a chill run down her spine despite the suite's perfect climate control. "Then what are you suggesting?" Faisal walked to the bar and picked up a silver letter opener that had been placed decoratively next to a crystal bowl of dates. He tested its weight in his hand, running his thumb along its edge. "I'm suggesting that some problems require permanent solutions." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Amina's mind struggled to process what she was hearing. "Faisal, you're scaring me." "You don't mean—" "What I mean," he interrupted, his voice eerily calm, "is that a tragic accident on our wedding night would be much easier to explain than a messy divorce. A grieving widower garners sympathy, not suspicion." Amina backed toward the door, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "You're not thinking clearly. You're upset, but you would never." "Would not?" Faisal asked, advancing toward her with the letter opener still in his hand. "You seem to have a lot of misconceptions about who I am, just as I had misconceptions about who you are." She reached for the door handle, but Faisal was faster. He grabbed her wrist, his grip like iron, and pulled her back into the room. The letter opener glinted in the soft lighting, and Amina realized with growing horror that her husband, the man she had loved, the man she had married just hours ago, was seriously considering killing her. "Please," she gasped, struggling against his grip. "Think about what you're doing. Think about your family, your reputation. Murder won't solve anything." Faisal's grip tightened, and she winced in pain. "Murder is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as protecting my family's honor, preserving what you tried to destroy." Tears streamed down Amina's face as she looked into the eyes of the man she had thought she knew. "I love you," she whispered desperately. "Despite everything, I love you. Doesn't that mean anything?" For a moment, something flickered in Faisal's eyes, a shadow of the man he had been before tonight's revelations, but was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by cold determination. "Love built on lies isn't love at all," he said quietly. "It's just another deception." The suite fell silent again, but this time the silence was different. It was the silence before a storm, heavy with the promise of violence. Outside, Dubai continued its relentless pursuit of progress and perfection, unaware that in one of its most luxurious hotels, a wedding night was about to become a murder scene. Amina closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, knowing that her carefully constructed new life was about to end in the most brutal way possible. The penthouse suite had become a prison, its luxury now feeling oppressive and suffocating. Amina's back was pressed against the marble wall, Faisal's grip still tight around her wrist, the letter opener catching the light from the crystal chandelier above. The city of Dubai sprawled beneath them, Millions of people living their lives, unaware of the life and death struggle playing out in the sky above them. Faisal, listen to me, Amina pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. If you do this, you'll destroy yourself too. You'll become everything you claim to despise. A man without honor, a murderer. Is that really what your grandfather would have wanted? For a moment, Faisal's grip loosened slightly. The mention of his grandfather, the patriarch who had built their family empire on principles of integrity and respect, seemed to penetrate the fog of rage that had consumed him. His breathing was heavy, labored, as if he were fighting an internal war between his fury and his conscience. My grandfather, he said slowly, never had to deal with a wife who made a mockery of everything he built. He never had to face the shame of being deceived by the woman he trusted most. Amina seized on this moment of hesitation. But he did face challenges. He faced poverty, discrimination, people who tried to tear him down. And he overcame them with dignity, not violence. He would tell you that killing me won't restore your honor. It will destroy it forever. Faisal's hand trembled, and for a brief moment, Amina thought she might have reached him. But then his phone buzzed on the marble counter, and the sound seemed to snap him back to his dark purpose. He glanced at the screen, and his face hardened once again. Another message from Khalid, he said coldly. More photos, more evidence of your lies. It seems your American boyfriend wasn't the only one. There are pictures of you with other men at other parties. How many were there, Amina? How many men have touched what was supposed to be mine alone? The accusation hit Amina like a physical blow. That's not true, she gasped. Michael was the only one. Those other photos, they're just friends, just people I knew at university. I never. Liar, Faisal roared, his control finally snapping completely. Even now, even with the evidence in front of you, you continue to lie. He raised the letter opener, and Amina saw her death reflected in its polished surface. Time seemed to slow as she watched her husband, the man who had promised to love and protect her, prepare to end her life. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had spent so much energy trying to escape her past, only to have it catch up with her in the most brutal way possible. But Amina wasn't ready to die. Not like this. Not without fighting for the life she had worked so hard to build. With a surge of adrenaline, she twisted away from Faisal's grip, her wedding dress tearing as she broke free. She stumbled toward the bedroom, desperate to put distance between herself and the weapon in his hand. Behind her, she heard him curse in Arabic, his footsteps heavy on the marble floor as he pursued her. You can't run from this, Amina, he shouted. You can't run from what you've done. She reached the bedroom and grabbed the champagne bottle from the ice bucket beside the bed. The crystal container was heavy in her hands, and she turned to face Faisal as he appeared in the doorway, his face twisted with rage and betrayal. Stay back, she warned, raising the bottle above her head. I don't want to hurt you, but I won't let you kill me. Faisal laughed bitterly. You think you can hurt me more than you already have? You think a champagne bottle is going to stop me from doing what needs to be done? He advanced slowly, the letter opener held low at his side, like a predator stalking its prey. You know what the worst part is? I actually loved you. I thought I had found the perfect wife, the perfect mother for my future children. I was going to give you everything, wealth, status, a life most women can only dream of. And all you had to do was be honest with me. Tears streamed down Amina's face as she backed toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. I was honest about the things that mattered, she said desperately. I was honest about my love for you, about my desire to be a good wife, about my commitment to our marriage. My past doesn't change any of that. Your past changes everything. Faisal snarled. It makes our entire relationship a lie. It makes me a fool. It makes our marriage a joke. He lunged forward, and Amina swung the champagne bottle with all her strength. It connected with his shoulder, sending him staggering backward, but he didn't fall. Instead, he looked at her with something approaching admiration. You have more fight in you than I expected, he said, rubbing his shoulder. But it won't be enough. The cat-and-mouse game continued for several more minutes, with Amina using furniture and the suite's layout to stay out of Faisal's reach. But she was tiring, her elaborate wedding dress hampering her movements, and she knew she couldn't evade him forever. Finally, cornered near the bar with nowhere left to run, Amina made one last desperate plea. Faisal, if you kill me, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. Your family's reputation will be destroyed anyway. Your mother will have to live with the shame of having raised a murderer. Is that really what you want? Faisal paused, the letter opener raised above his head. For a moment, sanity seemed to return to his eyes. He looked around the suite, at the scattered rose petals, the overturned furniture, the champagne staining the Persian rug, and seemed to realize the magnitude of what he was about to do. But then his phone buzzed again, another message from his cousin, another reminder of his humiliation. The moment of clarity passed, replaced once again by cold fury. Better a murderer than a fool, he said quietly. Better prison than a lifetime of shame. As the letter opener descended toward her heart, Amina closed her eyes and whispered one final prayer, not for herself, but for the man she had loved, who was about to destroy both their lives in a moment of uncontrollable rage. The last thing she saw was the Dubai skyline through the window, the city lights blurring through her tears as her fairy tale came to its tragic end. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floor of the penthouse suite, illuminating a scene that would haunt Dubai's elite circles for years to come. Hotel security had discovered the body at 6:47 a.m. when housekeeping reported that the newlyweds hadn't responded to their wake-up call. What they found was a tableau of violence that contradicted everything the luxury hotel represented. Amina lay motionless near the floor-to-ceiling windows, her wedding dress stained crimson, the letter opener protruding from her chest. Rose petals, once symbols of romance, were now scattered across a crime scene that would make international headlines. The champagne bottle lay shattered nearby, its contents mixing with blood on the Persian rug that had cost more than most people's annual salary. Faisal sat in the velvet armchair where Amina had first learned of his discovery, staring blankly at his hands. The rage that had consumed him hours earlier had evaporated, leaving behind only the crushing weight of what he had done. When the police arrived, they found him in the same position, catatonic, unable to speak or even acknowledge their presence. Detective Yasmin Alzara had seen many crime scenes during her 15 years with Dubai police, but this one was different. The opulence of the setting, the high-profile nature of the families involved, and the sheer brutality of the act created a perfect storm of media attention and political pressure. As she surveyed the scene, she couldn't help but think about the irony. In a city built on transformation and reinvention, a woman had been killed for trying to transform herself. The investigation that followed was swift but thorough. Faisal's phone contained all the evidence needed to establish motive. The messages from his cousin Khalid, the photos of Amina's university days, the timeline of his growing rage as he learned about his wife's hidden past. Security cameras in the hotel corridors showed no one entering or leaving the suite after the couple had retired for the night, eliminating any possibility of an outside intruder. But it was the psychological profile that emerged during the investigation that truly shocked those who knew Faisal. Interviews with family members, business associates, and friends revealed a man obsessed with control and perfection, someone who had built his entire identity around the concept of honor and reputation. His mother, Fatima al-Rashid, broke down during questioning, admitting that she had raised her son to believe that a woman's worth was tied to her purity and that any deception in this regard was unforgivable. "I created a monster," she whispered to Detective Alzara during one particularly difficult interview. "I taught him that honor was more important than mercy, that reputation mattered more than love. I never imagined it would lead to this." The trial that followed became a media sensation, not just in the UAE, but internationally. It exposed the dark underbelly of a society caught between tradition and modernity, where women were expected to be perfect while men were forgiven their imperfections. Feminist groups rallied around Amina's memory, while conservative voices argued that her deception had justified Faisal's rage, if not his actions. Faisal's defense team, led by one of Dubai's most prominent lawyers, attempted to argue temporary insanity, claiming that the shock of discovering his wife's lies had caused a complete psychological break. They painted him as a victim of deception, a man whose trust had been so thoroughly betrayed that he couldn't be held fully responsible for his actions. But the prosecution, led by the formidable counselor Mariam Hassan, told a different story. They argued that Faisal's actions were premeditated, that he had made a calculated decision to kill his wife rather than face the social embarrassment of her past. They presented evidence of his controlling behavior during their courtship, his obsession with Amina's appearance and behavior, and his family's history of treating women as property rather than partners. The most damning testimony came from Amina's university friend, Sarah Mitchell, who had flown in from the United States to testify. She described Amina as a young woman struggling to balance her family's expectations with her desire for independence, someone who had made mistakes but had genuinely tried to find her way back to her faith and culture. Amina wasn't perfect, Sarah said through tears on the witness stand, but she was trying to be the woman she thought she needed to be. She loved Faisal deeply, and she believed that her past didn't define her future. She died because she dared to hope for a second chance. The verdict, when it came, sent shockwaves through Dubai's social circles. Faisal was found guilty of premeditated murder and sentenced to life in prison. The judge, in his closing remarks, spoke about the need for society to evolve beyond the toxic concepts of honor and shame that had led to this tragedy. No woman should die because she had a past, Judge Ahmed Al-Mansouri declared. No man should believe that his honor is more important than his wife's life. This case represents everything that is wrong with our attitudes toward women and marriage. The Al-Rashid family's business empire crumbled in the aftermath of the trial. Contracts were canceled, partnerships dissolved, and the family name became synonymous with scandal rather than success. Faisal's mother, Fatima, became a recluse, haunted by the role she had played in shaping her son's twisted worldview. But perhaps the most tragic aspect of the entire affair was how easily it could have been prevented. If Faisal had been capable of forgiveness, if society had been more accepting of women's pasts, if love had been valued over reputation, Amina might still be alive. Instead, she became another victim of a culture that demanded perfection from women while excusing violence from men. The penthouse suite at the Burj Al Noor Hotel was permanently closed after the murder, its luxury tainted by the blood that had been spilled there. The hotel management claimed it was out of respect for the victim, but everyone knew the truth. No one wanted to stay in a room where a woman had been killed for the crime of having lived. Years later, Amina's story would be told and retold, becoming a cautionary tale about the dangers of deception and the price of obsession with honor. But for those who knew her personally, she would be remembered not as a victim or a cautionary tale, but as a young woman who had tried to build a better life for herself and had paid the ultimate price for her ambition. In the end, the only winner in this tragedy was the truth, cold, brutal, and unforgiving. It had destroyed 2 lives, shattered 2 families, and exposed the ugly reality beneath Dubai's glittering facade. And in a city built on the promise that anyone could reinvent themselves, Amina's death served as a stark reminder that some people would kill to prevent that transformation.